Welcome to the Ballet Help Desk podcast. My name is Jenny, and I am joined by my co-founder, Brett. We are both proud ballet moms who met backstage at our children's recital. During our kids' training, we found that resources were limited, and we relied on dance magazines and fellow parents in the lobby for information. Now that our children are embarking on their professional careers, we are excited to share our combined 20 years of experience as ballet moms with all of you. We will be bringing in experts to help make sense of this complex world of ballet training. Today we welcome Ilya Kozadayev from the North Carolina School of the Arts. We had a fascinating chat about ballet competitions and why he finds them quite valuable. We hope you enjoyed this conversation.
We are with Ilya Kozadayev today. He is the Associate Professor of Ballet at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts. So thank you, Ilya, for your time. I really appreciate it. And let's just jump right in with you telling us a little bit about yourself and also the University of North Carolina School of the Arts.
Hello, and thank you for having me. This is great to be here. And I really appreciate what you all are doing, providing so much information for those that need it. And hopefully the listeners that are going to be tuning in are going to get a lot of good information that they can use moving forward for their dancers. Yes, so thank you. My name is Ilya Kozadayev, and I'm the Associate Professor of Ballet at North Carolina, or University of North Carolina School of the Arts. I've now been with the program this is going to be my 7th year. And prior to that, I was a professor at the University of Oklahoma. And before that, I was a professional dancer with multiple companies. The last one being Houston Ballet. I was there for 10 years as a soloist.
We really appreciate you joining us. So we would like to speak to you a little bit about competitions. So North Carolina School of the Arts participates in competitions. Can you talk a little bit about why your school does this?
We do it for a few different reasons. One, of course, is to make sure that we're providing our students with the opportunity to perform outside of campus and the opportunity to experience these competitions. And I think it's also a good avenue for the School of the Arts itself, for us as the University of North Carolina, put our talent out there so that we're kind of hidden away a bit down here. And so I think this provides us the opportunity to show what we do here and to show the kind of strong training that we have.
So do you just bring soloists, or do you also bring ensembles?
We typically just bring soloists. And I'm not sure if we've done any ensembles before I've joined, but in the last 2 years, we've done ensembles. We've done boys' ensembles.
Oh, that's nice. That's kind of exciting for boys. For your students, because you bring mostly soloists, how much time typically do you spend preparing your students for the competition season?
It differs from case to case, I think from student to student. But I typically prefer, if I'm coaching someone, I prefer to have at least 2 hours a week, if not more, with the student on that particular variation or 2 variations, right? A classical variation and a contemporary solo. So I think two hours a week is probably minimum. The closer we get to the competition, the more frequently I like meeting with the students, even if it's for 15 minutes a day, just to run the piece, run the solo, run the contemporary piece, so that it's constantly in their body, so that they're constantly thinking about it, so that they're constantly going over the corrections and going over the material. So yeah, I would say that two hours is probably what we typically do.
When you're picking a solo for a student, do they have input in that and how they choose what they do, or do you as their director choose what they are going to dance?
I think it's a little bit of both. We don't mandate anything as a school, definitely, but I think it's just a conversation with myself and the student, and just sitting down and picking and choosing a good variation that fits. I think it fits the dynamic of the student and the physique of the student, as well as it's going to be a repertoire that will actually push them in a way that will push them to get out of their comfort zone, and have at the same time something to show. So it's not necessarily completely something that is alien to them, where they're going to fall flat. So they should feel comfortable and have a challenge in the solo as well. I think that to me anyway, that is very important, so that there's a good balance of things.
How do you kind of feel about that? The student doing the same variation for like 4 years.
It really depends on the teacher and the student and where the student is in their development, because everyone develops differently and at a different rate. Competitions have pushed the technical progress, I think, of dancers lately, and it's very, very obvious from where we were maybe 20 years ago with what age groups have done on stage, and looking at it then and now, it's very, very different. I think that the progress has definitely happened. However, if a student is developing in a different way and they need their time, then perhaps doing the same variation, a couple of years in a row is not necessarily a bad thing if it's going to serve them. If it's just used, to try to highlight the student, that's one thing. But if it really is used to have a technical progression that is just rooted in training the same exact variation and training the same way and trying to, improve on that, I think it's not necessarily a bad thing. If you look at videos and if you look at the training, let's say one of the greatest, Mikhail Baryshnikov, he was not doing the things that dancers do at 15 years old.
Right.
And he wasn't perhaps as good at those things at 15 years old, but then, it takes time. And because the training was set in such a way where they weren't actually allowed, students were not allowed to do certain technical elements before they could cover the basics.
Mm-hmm.
It was very strict that way. But then when he was a professional, there's still people to this day that cannot do things he did. So it depends. Everything takes its own time and its own course, and I think it's up to the teacher and the particular student at how fast they develop the variation and how much variety of variations they choose to do, within the span of their competition careers.
Thank you. I think that's an interesting perspective, because that's something I never really understood, why people chose to do that year after year. We have a lot of listeners who have younger students, and this might be their first time going to a ballet competition. So what are some ways parents and students can prepare for like a YGP regional, for example? What are some things that they can expect from that experience?
They can expect a lot of dancers at the competition and a wide range of talent. And they can expect, I think, from the process itself, I believe that the process is quite helpful because it sort of sets a bar of where dance or classical ballet, in this case particularly, happens to be at this moment in time in this country, and almost, it connects the world. So I think it's a really good way to expose your dancer, if your dancer is serious, exposing your dancer to what is actually going on and what is happening in the ballet world, how it operates as far as, scholarships and schools, and getting exposure to different teachers and different styles and different dancers, and seeing different dancers and just dancing next to different dancers in the master classes and watching the competition itself. I think is a really, really good experience. And if it is your first time, it's going to be quite overwhelming, I think, because there's, it is a lot. But I think the process leading up to the competition is quite important. It gives you a one-on-one with the teacher for the most part, if that is the case in your studio. And if you're going as a soloist, obviously, if you're going in there as a group piece, it is very, very similar in the sense that you're going to be rehearsing, you're going to be preparing, there's going to be a lot of pressure. And pressure could be a good thing, because pressure, if you're serious, is what happens later on in your career when you're performing. So a lot of the times I've actually noticed this when I was a dancer, when we would I would be dancing next to dancers that have done a lot of competitions. I believe, it was my opinion, and I've noticed this a lot, that those dancers that have done a lot of competitions have actually had an easier time coping with pressure before a performance or during a show. They wouldn't get as nervous, they wouldn't get as jittery, they would have a lot of focus. So this, I think it's a great thing. that answers your questions.
No, it definitely does. I mean, you're preaching to the choir for Brett and I, because we both, even though our kids didn't do a lot of ballet competition, they both did like jazz and tap and lyrical and all of that. And I think it really helped them. It was kind of invaluable. It's really made them performers, not just dancers, have an ease on stage, and they're used to things going wrong, which
I mean,
happens all the time.
I think it's a great experience, and it can be a really, even if you're not doing well and you're competing and you're not, and you think that you're not doing as well as you could be, or you didn't have a good show, it is still an experience of live performance. It's an experience of what you might expect when you are a professional, when you are dancing. You're not always going to have perfect shows. So this, I think, sets you up, and it does in a way, again, even if you're not doing well, it still gives you a confidence boost. I remember coming back home from a competition. I did Prix de Lausanne when I was 17 years old, and I came back home and I just felt I felt so much easier dancing at home.
Oh, that's
My
interesting.
home stage. It just felt really, I felt at ease. I knew where I was. I knew my surroundings. I knew the dancers around me. I felt less pressure. There's no judges in the audience. I had a great show for my school end of school year performance. I just remember feeling like really, really easy and relieved and confident. And I felt the opposite of that at the competition. So I think it gives you, even if you don't realize at the moment, or if your dancer doesn't realize that at the moment, I think you walk away with some invaluable experience.
I think the other thing, that ballet competitions do, and we've talked to several parents about this over the years, is if your student wants to dance professionally, they need to get out of their school and see what's out there and really see how they stack up. And when you go to even a regional competition or even a finals, you get a really good sense of what the talent's like and kind of where you fit in. And I know when my son did that, he was young, but he saw all these dancers who were really talented, and it kind of lit a fire under him. And he said, I want to be like them. Like, I want to get there. And so, we always tell parents, like, competitions can also be a great way to kind of figure out where your student fits in, and also give them that extra motivation to really work hard to get to where some of those older and more experienced dancers are right now.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. Yeah, that's very well noted. Like I said, it sets the bar, and it can inspire, right? It inspires you when you go and you see, even if you're watching from backstage or you're watching a live feed, the dancers that you're competing against, it can really be eye-opening, and you go, okay, I'm doing really well, but to receive the scholarship or to get this contract or et cetera, or, to get into the school, I need to be at this level. So maybe you're going to go back to your studio, you're going to go back home, and you're going to take more classes, or you're going to pursue different summer programs. You're going to maybe look up where those dancers are training and who they're training with. And you may, go down a rabbit hole of exploring different styles of training and different techniques and different, what have you. So I think it's inspiring, it's eye-opening, and it definitely connects the dance world right now.
Yeah, it definitely does. So it's interesting you brought up that you did Prix de Lausanne, and North Carolina School of the Arts sends kids to Prix de Lausanne. What are some of what are the differences that you see between a YAGP or some of the other ballet competitions that happen in the US versus Prix?
I mean, they're both very, very similar in the sense that they're student competitions, they're junior competitions. And they provide scholarships and opportunities to learn. So you have, for YGP, with YGP, you have classes that are taught by faculty or different teachers and former dancers or even leading dancers of today who are in the jury. So you're getting exposed to a lot of different styles and a lot of different teachers. And you're competing at the same time. Prix de Lausanne, you have a coaching session, which I think is fantastic. So once you get there, you have a mini coaching session for your classical solo with typically a former dancer, a superstar former dancer. And then you also have, which is really, really interesting, because their repertoire for the contemporary is set. So you can only pick out of 4 or 5 different solos. You actually get to rehearse with either the choreographer or the choreographer's assistant who created the solo and who created the work. So I think that sort of information for a young dancer is really, really important, because when you are working, I think, in a smaller school or a studio or even a larger school, there's not a lot of time that you get to spend with a living choreographer, unless you have work created on you all the time, which I don't think a lot of schools do. I mean, we have work created for us quite a bit, and I know other big schools, but if you're in a smaller studio, you have your teacher perhaps creating your solo. You have maybe a jazz teacher creating a solo for you for the contemporary work, contemporary teacher, etc. So you work in that sense. But someone of that stature who has done a lot of work around the world that creates solos for Prix de Lausanne, and working with either them or their assistant I think is a really, really fantastic tool, a fantastic learning opportunity. And now what they do at Prix de Lausanne is they have an actual young choreographers competition. And so there are choreographers from different schools around the world that submit their work. And if their solo ends up winning, then their solo gets to be in the repertoire of the Prix de Lausanne. So as a competitor, you could choose to dance that solo, and then you would actually go and you would be coached by one of those young choreographers, which I think is a fantastic collaborative experience as well as a learning experience. So I think that's how they are different. Those are I think the main differences that I see. You take classes at Prix de Lausanne, which are judged, which does not happen at the YAGP. So that is another big difference. YAGP, you are sort of freshly observed as a dancer performer on stage right away, whereas in Prix de Lausanne, you have a few days of classes. You're taking a classical ballet class, which is judged. Then you're taking a contemporary class, which is judged. And then there's a cutoff after that. And then you are a dancer, you perform on stage, then your solos. And then there's a cutoff after that. And then there's about, I believe, 20 dancers, 25 dancers. Maybe this year was 30 dancers that made the finals of the Prix de Lausanne.
So it's significantly smaller than a competition like YAGP.
It is numbers wise. It's quite a bit smaller. I believe their numbers were at around 80 dancers from around the world, and to get into the Prix de Lausanne, it's a very different route. So you can't just apply, sign up and go. You have to submit a video audition, and the video audition is very specific. You have to sit down with your teacher and you have to choreograph an entire class that's going to fit the mold of what the judges there are looking for, what they're looking to see, and what choreography and what exercises they want to see from the class. And you have to submit a contemporary solo as well of your choice, which is not part of the repertoire of the Prix de Lausanne. And if you make it in, then you have to submit your classical or choose your classical variation and choose your contemporary solo. And yes, about 75 to 80 dancers were admitted from around the world. I believe 10 of them were from the United States this past year.
Okay. And
we had one of the finalists as well.
Oh, congratulations.
Yes, thank you.
That's right. You took a couple of kids to Prix, I think, right?
I went to Prix the year before.
Okay.
And my colleague, Misha Chupakov, went to Prix this past year with Will Jives, who was in the finals.
Okay.
And I went with my student in 2022. We were there with Jet Camille.
Right. Okay. So when you take kids to YAGP or you take kids to Prix, are the goals different that you give your students for each competition?
No, I wouldn't say necessarily that they're different. I think for me, the goals are always to improve and to do your best. So I think the goals are very much similar. Even if the repertoire is different, right? The goal of dancer, I think, over student dancer is to try to achieve and to try to improve constantly. And I think this is what is important, and why competitions are so helpful is because it sort of gives you a goal. Because a lot of the times, especially early ballet training gets to be quite slow. And it can get monotonous in the sense that you're doing the same things over and over. You're doing the same, exercises over and over. You may not necessarily be seeing quick results. And I think with today's generation, quick results is what we look for because of, how instant things are. So that can become difficult. And I think something like a competition really sets up that goal. Okay, well, so in 3 months, I have to be on stage and I have to be able to do A, B, and C. And I think that really gives that push and that motivation. Okay, so I really have to work on this and I have to do this, and I have to work harder on my turns, and we need to figure out the jumps, and we need to figure out the port de bras here and work on my turnout, and I need to stretch a little bit more. So all those things come into play when you're working, and I think it provides motivation. It provides that goal. Right, like athletes that train for the Olympics, for instance, they know. I think they have it down to a science of where there's what point, 2 weeks before the competition, I was supposed to be eating this and drinking this and exercising so much, and I should be weighing this much, and et cetera, et cetera. We're not quite as scientific, but I think that that there is definitely a way to really prepare for a competition that can be very, very beneficial and can show great results. I love to film my students before and during the process, and then you can really, really see where we start and where we end up.
Sure, that's great. I mean, to be able to see that progression, I'm sure the students love that from, when they first start something to when they finally perform it. North Carolina School of the Arts obviously has a full ballet curriculum, but you also take your kids to competition. How do you see the balance between preparing for competition versus just drilling in the studio?
You have to have a good balance of things, of course. But I think competitions are important. They're important for the students that are competing. They're important for, I think, showcasing the school. I think they're also important for the faculty that are teaching, for the teachers to travel and see what is going on, because many times you can get stuck in your little world, and you're doing well, and you get out there and you're like, okay, there's different ways of approaching things, and perhaps it opens your eyes as well. But I don't think that focusing only on competitions is the way to go. We have a large repertoire at University of North Carolina. The kids are super busy. They are performing so much. They have academics on top of everything. So they're very, very busy. So we don't get as much time, and we don't put as much time into that process as other schools do, who mainly focus on competitions. Perhaps they don't have the avenues that we do as far as performances are concerned. We are lucky because we have 4 productions per year. Our students perform in the Nutcracker. Before the Nutcracker, there's a fall dance, which is typically more contemporary students. But then there are 2 other productions after Nutcracker, and the Nutcracker is a full production. 2 productions after Nutcracker, which are typically 3 or 4 contemporary or ballet works in the evenings program. So they do have quite a lot of dancing that they do during the year. There's also the student choreographers that create pieces and use, the dancers each other. They use each other, they choreograph, and there's a show for that as well. There's quite a bit that is going on. So yes, actually squeezing a competition is quite difficult. It's quite difficult to find studio space, and it's difficult for faculty to find a free moment, a couple hours a week, an hour here and 2 hours, hopefully. It's quite difficult to grab.
Yeah, I can see that. It sounds like the students don't have a whole lot of free time in their schedule to work everything in. So I want to turn to something else about competitions. We all know ballet is a really small world, and everybody kind of seems to know each other. Are there, there are a lot of things floating around out there that parents believe or dancers believe. Are there any myths that you think exist around the competition world that you'd like to take the opportunity to dispel?
A lot of the times you hear that the competitions are rigged. They're very, very political.
Right.
That the dancer was misjudged completely. And perhaps that may happen somewhere, but for the most part, I would say, and being part of it, I have judged YAGP as well. You have a scoring system. You use the scoring system. Those scores are added up. Typically, there's only a deliberation if somebody is really, really close, if like a half a point or 1 point away. And then, yes, I mean, it can come in. And at the end of the day, all of this is opinion, right? It is all opinion. My kids do swimming, so it's all timed.
Right.
So with
Right.
these, you have the timer. You either went faster or you didn't. This is opinion, and sometimes it's purely opinion. You may like someone's aesthetic, how they look, right? You may not like their technique, or you maybe vice versa, right? You like their technique, but the aesthetic isn't there, and it's not your cup of tea, and you're going okay. But then at the end of the day, I think competitions are also auditions at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I say that because they're for young dancers. And so they are auditions. When that becomes the case, you have a lot of the times judges who are looking for dancers and for scholarships and to offer scholarships. So you may think one dancer is better than the other from where you're sitting and where you're looking. And maybe technically a dancer, you like one dancer and you're going, well, why didn't that dancer win?
Mm-hmm.
Well, perhaps, in the jury, there were 4 or 5 or 6 people that wanted that this other dancer for their school because they see potential.
Mm-hmm.
I think at this stage, potential plays a really, really big role. It is like receiving an amazing, I don't know, ingredients that you can then bake a cake with at your own school.
Right.
Right. And here you have already a cake that is baked for you and it's really, really good, but you want these ingredients that are really raw and they're not ready yet. And everybody's just looking at the fact that they're not ready, but you're looking at the potential and you're going, oh my God, I can really create something in 3 years in my school with my training. And then as a director, I can send the student off into the world as my product. And that is what I want to do, right? That promotes the school. And I want to feed, my company that I work for instance, is expecting, me to feed them 3 or 4 or 10 dancers per season. I don't know if 10 is but you know what I mean? So yes, it may seem from where we're sitting sometimes and looking from the audience or, and you're looking at your own child performing and going, okay, he or she is doing so well. And it is true because, again, the progress has happened and they are doing well and they may look really, really good compared to others. But then there are people that are more interested in something that particular that they're looking for. And that they're looking at potential sometimes over I would say, the readiness of a dancer, if that makes any sense, or over the actual product that is already there. So sometimes that wins over. And it may not seem fair. And I've been in that situation as well, to where I've gone, okay, well, that is clearly not as good. And then you go back and you look, okay, well, that physique is incredible. There's so much there that you can dig through. There's so much there that you can very easily fix. And that dancer is going to become, amazing. And then I go, okay, well, that makes sense. I think there's a bit of that as well. And I think that's absolutely legitimate. These competitions are meant to feed the ballet world and feed the schools of the ballet world, which then send students out there, and those schools want and expect a really, really good array of talent. And sometimes they're looking for a very, very particular aesthetic or a particular dancer, a particular height, a particular body type, and a particular build that we don't necessarily know about. We may suspect, we're not necessarily always sure. So it's not always even when I watch and I try to, even if I'm just watching, I try to go, okay, well, I think that's going to be top 5 for sure. And that dancer is not in there. And I go, okay, well, why not? So, they were looking for something else.
Right. That's really interesting.
Right. Can I ask you about costume? So a lot of parents talk about, there's, oh my gosh, the tutu matters so much. Oh, it doesn't matter at all. When you're judging, how much does that actually matter to you? And how much emphasis do you put on it?
That's a tricky one because I think when the costume is great, you don't notice it. When the costume is bad, you notice it.
I see.
So I think it's one of those, when you have a car that's specific color, you don't even notice it because it's kind of like, okay, you're just looking at the car. And sometimes if the color is just your least favorite color, it's just horrendous, you're going, oh my God, why would you put that color on that beautiful car? I think to me is the same. I would go, okay, well, that makes the dancer's legs look short. And I don't think that she has short legs. Yes, I think it matters because it's proportions, and proportions are aesthetics, and aesthetics are what make lines, and et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, I think good costume matters. I think proportionally well-made costume really matters, and a lot of things go into that. Um, you know, color-wise, it's neither here nor there for me, but some people are sticklers for that. So I think the better you can do in terms of costume, the better it is.
We have a lot of parents that listen to this. It's more for parents. So, let's say you have a student and they just don't perform that well in the competition. So, what is some advice you have for both parents and students there as they're kind of navigating that? And maybe they do really, really well one year and then really poorly the next. What's some advice for parents to kind of help work with the school to help their student kind of overcome that and talk through some of the pitfalls of performing?
I think that performing is, like I was saying, it is a living, alive art form. So it's going to have its ups and downs. I think the most important thing that you can convey to your dancer, or to your, or as a parent, to your dancer, is that this is normal. Ups and downs are normal. And I think to stress about that, I think is counterproductive. I think we have to find a way to cope with what we have on a given day and a given performance, on a given rehearsal, and use that, as I was saying, as a learning experience, which is what this is. It is a learning experience to sort of strengthen um, the student, or to strengthen the dancer in every way. That means, and emotionally, and not physically. I'm not talking physically, right? Emotionally, mentally, because a performance is very much a focused skill. It's very much a mental skill, and a skill of mental toughness, right? In the moment, you're only out there for a minute and a half, sometimes two at the most. So, and you have to, right? You have to be so focused. It's like, many athletes. Like I know that, I golf recreationally, so I follow some of the golfing, and they have mind coaches that travel with them, so they can focus on one shot, and they're only doing one shot, and it's one motion over and over. We have so many different motions that we do, and we have so many different things that we have to cope with. So I think setting your expectations and hopes high, but also being grounded in the fact that you're human, and things are not always gonna just be perfect, and that it's okay to make mistakes, and it is okay to make mistakes on stage, and it's okay to not be perfect when competing, and it doesn't mean that this is your last chance ever. I think taking all of that as a learning experience and keep moving forward. I think that's the best advice I can come up with, as far as far as that is concerned. As a performer, I've had multiple shows go really, really bad, and I remember them till this day as if it was very, very vivid, very, very fresh, and the feeling of walking away and going, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just did that on stage. I have never done that in a studio ever in my life, and I just did that on stage. Or you forget choreography, or you get so nervous that anything can happen. You blank out on stage completely because you're so nervous. That happens. You forget where you are. You forget which way is front and which way is back. That happens. Mm-hmm. You lose yourself in the lights because it's so dark. Anything can happen. And that's okay. That's okay. I think we learn from that. We move on, and we try to, in the studio, work almost, at least for me, this works. Worked for me as a dancer. Work on every rehearsal as if it is a performance. Mm-hmm. Meaning, okay, if you're going to run through your solo, go ahead and try your solo as if you're performing. Do not stop. If something is going bad, fix it. If you're falling, get up and keep going, unless you hurt yourself and injure yourself, obviously. But if it's safe to keep going, keep going. So I think that creates that sort of resilience that I'm going to push forward, and these things happen and they can happen. And so if it happens on stage, it's not going to shock you as much.
Yeah, I think that is such great advice. And I think so many dancers forget that they're human as well, and they don't allow themselves a little bit of grace, and it's because it's always so striving for perfection.
There is no perfection. There is no perfection.
Right, and mistakes make it interesting, as a viewer as well. So we've spoken so much about competition, and your insights have been super valuable, and you've shared so many things that you think are positive about competitions. Could you maybe speak to one thing you would love to see change in the ballet competition world?
A lot of the competitions with breaking the dancers up when they are younger into each smaller categories, more categories would help for me personally. I think, having a category of dancers from 15 all the way up to 19 is difficult because so many dancers, at the age of 15 cannot compare to dancers at the age of 19, just simply because of maturity level and physicality, etc., even though you see a lot of talent. So to me, it's very difficult to, that big discrepancy in age is quite a lot. I think I see that more so in boys than in girls. I think to me that would sort of bridge that sort of discrepancy where it's going, okay, well, that is just really good, but really immature. And that is not quite as talented, but already really mature. So how do you compare the two and say, okay, so you judge the dancer on themselves and not in comparison to others, but then inevitably it has to happen. You have to say, okay, well, in reality, this was a much better turn because the dancer was 19 years old and this was not as good of a turn, but it has so much more potential. So perhaps when they're 19, they're going to be much better. How do I judge that?
Right.
I think to me that always kind of, that's a little thing, I think.
I just think it's more attainable. I actually like it because it's something that could actually happen.
So it just, again, it depends on, is very individual on the development of a person.
Absolutely.
It takes it, everyone has their own path and their own time of development. And some develop much quicker than others. And I just think that to give them a little bit more of a even playing field.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice meeting you both, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you very much.
If you liked what you heard on this episode, please take a moment to help us spread the word. Leave us a review on your preferred podcast platform, tell a friend, and share on your social media. Also, as your dancers return home from their summer intensives, please head over to theballethelpdesk.com and leave us an anonymous review of the program. Help your fellow dance parents by letting them learn all about the good, the bad, and everything in between. We extend our gratitude to Ilya for chatting with us today. We greatly valued his honesty and candidness regarding ballet competitions and NCSA's involvement in them. I particularly appreciated his perspective on using these competitions as a benchmark and a learning tool for his dancers. To stay in the loop on all of our latest content, subscribe to our newsletter at ballethelpdesk.com and follow us on Facebook and YouTube. Until next time, have a great day.